So community ecology. So if we look at the ecological levels, then we have this, the smallest unit is the organism. So when there is a group of organisms, or we can say for the individuals of the same species, that become population. So that's we already talked about. And if we have a different populations living in a specific area, so that we call as the community. And if we have several communities together, that make up the ecosystem. So community is an assemblage of populations of various species living close enough for potential interaction. So these species, they are living together and they are communicating or they are interacting amongst themselves. Now, there's another term which is called ecological amplitude. So it is the range of environmental condition which a taxon can tolerate. So the organisms which are belonging to different taxa, so they can survive only in one or two conditions. So let's have a look at this particular example here. So in this marine ecosystem, so all those organisms which can survive the high salt conditions, so saline conditions, or in case of halophilic conditions, which can easily be dealt by those organisms. Maybe it's plants, maybe it's fishes, crabs, prawns. So only those organisms they can survive. Rest the organisms, either they'll move to freshwater bodies or they will be wiped off. So there are a couple of features of the community. So number one is the number of species. So in each and every community, whenever an ecologist defines a particular area, he needs to understand what are the different number of species. So the community has maybe few or maybe many. So in an ecological setup, the number of species could be determined, and usually they are in abundance. There are several species existing together in a ecological setup. So in any defined area, the number of species could vary. So let's say, for instance, in the previous slide, we saw the picture of a marine ecosystem. So in marine ecosystem, it is quite possible that the species could be more as compared to the species which are very close to that. Let's say the beach area or the green vegetation area, which is very close to the sea. Then comes the relative abundance of species. So it is possible that the different species, they could be having a different percentage. So let's say if we say that the total number of species or total of number of individuals living in a community are 100. So species A, it could be, let's say, 60. Species B, it could be 20. Species C could be 10. Species C could be 5. And species E could be another 5. So we can have a different proportion, different distribution. The nature of a species interaction could lead to the formation of food chain or food webs. So when there is only simple structure, let's say the animal is looking for its food, and probably it may be eaten by a higher animal as well. So we call it a food chain. And when there is a complex system, so where one organism could be eaten by a couple of other organisms, or it could eat a couple of other heterotrophs or autotrophs. So it depends. So that we call as the food webs. So all the communities, they usually have a physical structure. So they need to be defined. A defined boundary should be there. So community structure, now we have two terms here: species richness and the relative abundance. So in every community, the species richness, it is the number of species within a community. So if we take an example of a desert area and a normal green forest area. So in desert area, we see there are only few species of plants are surviving. Whereas in a green forest area, there are several species of plants which are surviving. So if we look at the species richness, we can comment that the green forest area is more rich in terms of species. It may have different variety of plants and trees. However, the area which is under the desert, they may have small number of plants and trees. So in a way, if we say which one is more rich, so the forest area is the more rich in terms of species. Now there's another term which is called the relative abundance. So it is the percentage of each species contributing to the total number of individuals. So the total number of individuals, they can be defined, they can be identified. Now each and every species could be contributing something. So let's say this class comprises of 104 students. Now there are a couple of students from biotechnology stream, there are a couple of students from microbiology, couple of students from biochemistry, some from environmental science, some from chemistry, maths, physics. So if we say that the richness of this particular class is high as compared to, let's say there's only single class of course which is offering mathematics or maybe physics. So in that mathematics or physics, so mostly those students who are doing integrated mathematics, they will be there. However, in this, let's say ecology and environment or EVS courses, students from different streams are also there. Now, if we see the relative abundance, so it means what? That what is the percentage of students who are from biotechnology? What is the number of students who are from biochemistry and so and forth? So all the students who are from different streams, they contribute to the total count, which is 104 in this particular case. A similar could be expanded to the natural ecosystem. So there what we see is that different plants, animals, birds, trees and insects, maybe worms, bacteria, virus. So there are a number of species which are existing together. Now those species will could be identified and we can count what is the contribution. Okay, so this is a pictorial representation of species richness versus relative abundance. So look at this particular example here. So this is community 1. So in this community 1, we have 4 different species, A, B, C, D. So if you look at this percentage here, so all the 4, they have 25%. Now if we see community 2, so there also we have 4 different species. However, the A has 80%, B has 5%, C has 5%, and D has 10%. So if we talk about the species richness, so both the communities are equally species rich. And we talk about the relative abundance, then in community 1, all the species have the same relative abundance. However, in community 2, there is unevenness. Species A is contributing the most. The relative abundance of species A is more, it is about 80%, followed by D and BC. So species richness could be defined as the number of species within a biological community. Species abundance is the number of individuals per species. And relative abundance refers to the evenness of distribution of individuals among species in a community. Now there's another term which is called the diversity index. So it reflects the quantitative assessment of different type of species in a community and the distribution of individual organism. So if we say that in a particular area, the population is more diverse. I just gave you an example of this class EVS. So I can comment that we have more diversity in terms of students participating from different streams. However, in other courses, let's say Hindi or maybe English or mathematics, this could be limited. There will be less diversity. There will be less students from different subjects areas. It is possible that 1 or 2 subject area students may be dominating. Okay, so now is the food chain and the food web. So if we compare food chain and food web, so food chain is a linear one. It usually follows only one path as animals search for their food. So let's say a simplest example would be the grass or the small plants. They could be eaten by a deer, and the deer could be eaten by a lion. So this is the one simplest food chain that one could imagine. Now look at this particular figure here. So here what we see that there is a complex system of different kind of organisms. So at the lowest level, what we have is phytoplanktons. So these are really small minuscule organisms found in the sea. So these could be eaten by different small organisms which are called krill or the copepods. Now these copepods in return, they could be eaten by carnivorous plankton, and followed by they could be food of birds, fishes and squids. And now again, these krills, they could directly be eaten by birds, crab eaters, even whales. Similarly, for the copepods, they could be eaten by directly fishes and squids. Now again, these birds and squids, they can be eaten by 4 or 5 different kind of organisms. And ultimately, most of these organisms like sperm whales, blue whales, and those, they could be eaten by the humans. So there is a complex network. In this complex network, one animal, one organism is eaten by the another one. And also there are several paths here you can see, and they all are interconnected. So in a food web, there are several paths which are interconnected, and not every interaction in the food web is equally important in maintaining equilibrium of the ecosystem. So in case of food chain, the grass, deer and the lion. So all the 3 units, they are important to maintain the proper ecosystem. If any one of them is removed, the ecosystem will be damaged. However, here in food web, either of this organism, if it is removed or low in number, it won't disturb the whole ecosystem as such. The ecosystem or the equilibrium will be maintained. So the features of a food web are, so food webs, they are complex with many species, as we saw in the previous slide. There are several organisms, several different species, and they together contribute with interaction at different levels with different organisms to a complex system which is called as the food web. Some interactions are weak and some interactions are strong. So it is quite possible that if, let's say, organism A, it could be eaten by organism B, C or D. So this organism A, it could be a staple diet for only organism B. C or D, they could survive or they could feed on another organism as well. So in a way, we can say that the interaction between A and B is strong, and AC and AD is weak. Why? Because the B organism can only survive on A. So that is the kind of important individual here in this particular food web. If that is removed, it will lead to ecological disturbance. However, C or D, they can survive on another species as well. So their impact would be less. Identify the direction of energy flow, but do not indicate the strength of food relationship. So here one can identify that what is the energy flow. So usually the small organisms, they are eaten by the large organisms. So or those organisms which are higher in the order. So one can easily identify that what is that percentage of organisms, the energy flow, what is the direction. It is flowing from, let's say, organism A, if it is eaten by B, from organism A to B to C and D. So here we can identify the flow of energy, but one cannot identify the amount of energy which is flowing. However, in case of food chain, one can identify the direction of energy flow as well as the amount of the energy flow. If you remember, there is a rule of 10%. So from one level to another level, only 10% of energy is passed. 90% energy is dissipated or goes waste into the ecological system. So here it is difficult to identify as there is a complex web of interactions. So some species are very influential in the community. So some of the species which are really strong or upper in the chain in the system, they are very influential. So they may dictate the survival of the lower organism, and as a whole, they may be responsible for maintaining the ecological balance. So now there are two different kind of hypotheses that could explain the food web or food chain interactions. So number one is the energetic hypothesis. So the length of a food chain is limited by inefficient energy transfer, as 90% energy is lost at each step in food chain. So usually there is a issue that what should be the length of a food chain. So I gave you one simplest example that the organisms are having, uh, let's say from the simplest that we can have, that grass to deer to lion. So all these three organisms, there is only a length of, let's say, three individuals, three units. So now from here, if we say that can we have more organisms, let's say deer could be eaten by hyena, and thus hyenas could be eaten by the lions. So one more individual is increased. So the length of the chain is also increased. So what dictates this particular length of the food chain? So that is usually dictated by the energy. So that is the energetic hypothesis. Another one is the dynamic stability hypothesis. So what does it say? It says that long food chains are less stable than the short ones due to a magnification of stochastic fluctuation in the size of species population found at one or more lower trophic level. Now, usually, if you look at the different trophic levels, there is a distribution of the populations. So lower organisms, they have this distribution. Their number is more as compared to the higher organisms. Now, because these lower organisms, they are eaten by the higher organisms, their number dictates how many would be there in the. Okay, so so if you look at these two things, then most of the studies or most of the data which is available from the food chain and food web, they support the energetic hypothesis that it is the flow of energy that dictates the length of the food chain or the food web in general. Then we can have two different models of community organization. So we can have bottom-up model of community organization, or we can have top-down model of community organization. So bottom-up, it's a unidirectional influence from lower to higher trophic levels. So lower organisms, they could be eaten by higher ones, or the lower organisms, they could be influenced by the higher ones. So this kind of the presence or absence of mineral nutrients determine the community structures. So if you remember, I gave you example a couple of times that in those areas where the availability of nutrients, water, and sunlight is more, so there the abundance of primary producers is more. So that will lead to the variation or survival of more and more organisms, followed by the higher organisms. Now there's another model, which is the top-down model. So here it proposes that controls come from the trophic level above. So the organism which is placed at the top, it controls the organisms which are at the bottom. So let's say the lion or tiger, which is at the top of the food chain, it controls the lower organisms. So predators, they control herbivores, which in turn controls the primary producers. So that's the kind of top down. So in bottom up, the control is from the nutrients or the availability of basic resources, and the top down model, the control is from the top one organism. So certain species, they have a very large impact on community structure. So they are either highly abundant or play a pivotal role in the community. And some species, they have less role. So we call them as the dominant species. So these are most abundant or have the highest biomass. So if you look at any kind of food chain, be it in the sea, be it on the land. So if we look at the overall biomass, so usually the dominant species has the largest biomass. Now there are a couple of specialties of these dominant species. So they are most competitive in exploiting the resources. So the resources which are available to them, they can easily exploit them. They are the individuals which utilizes them the best. They are most successful at avoiding predators. So that is only the reason that they are dominant species. If they couldn't avoid, then they would be finished or they would be lesser. So since they have evolved or they have developed those kind of techniques that they can avoid the predators, they have become the dominant species. So they are also the invasive species. So let's say if we talk about the food chain where the lion or the tiger is, so we can say that here the lion or tiger is the most dominant species, and it is the invasive also. It can kill and it can attack the other species. Okay, so look at this particular figure here. So here we have this keystone species. So they have a strong influence on the other species in the ecosystem. So look at this particular graph here. So this is the plant kelp, which is eaten by urchins, and this is in turn eaten by the otters. So in 1972 to 1997, this was the biomass, the study which was done. So here are somewhere around 86, 87, this was the large biomass, and here the sea urchins, they were feeding on it. They were less because they were eaten by the otters. Their number were high. Now a new species is being introduced. So this whale, a big fish, starts eating these otters. Now because of which the number of sea urchins increase. So you can see this increase in the number of sea urchins. Now these sea urchins, now their number increase. So now they are decreasing the number of kelps. So in a way, if we talk about what is the keystone species here, so keystone species here is the otter. So it's the change or the fluctuation in the number of population of otters that reflects or that changes the whole community structure. Okay, so community stability. So there are two types of community stabilities. Resistance communities. So they changes little in response to disturbance. So let's say, for example, there's an area, it's a very dense forest. Now it would hardly matter if the number of cows or deers increase in that particular area. Why? Because it's a really dense forest, and also the area receives a lot of rain. So every now and then the cow and buffaloes, they'll try to eat the plants in the trees. However, it will be replenished by the rain. So it's a kind of that these are communities are resistant to small change in the individual population. And also we can say that the change in the weather, that also kind of doesn't have much impact on that particular community. So even if the availability of water, let's say the conditions are a little bit dry, this population will still be stable. The second one is the resilient community. So it returns to former state after stochastic disturbance. So let's say, for example, there is fire, flood, or windstorm. So the whole community, the whole area will be disturbed. So now recently there was a fire in the northeastern part of India. So which is about in like 15, 12, 15 districts, they are surrounded by this particular fire. So eventually, these kind of forest fires, they broke up, and after a couple of years, again, the forest or the trees, they come up to that same situation. So in a way, we can say they are the resilient community.